Alrighty, this is a social studies video, and this is an introduction to supply and demand, which is the next thing that we're going to talk about in social studies. I think these videos will help, just similar to science. I'm going to go through and explain what we're looking for as you do these videos. All right, the first page there is an overview, and this is an expectation. You can read through that of what you as students will be able to do. It tells what standard we are looking at in our social studies standards. And so you can read through that and see. But we're going to be learning about supply, demand, scarcity, and surplus, and using some maps to understand how some of that might work. So we're going to look at this very first page. And the very first page is about economic concepts. And economics is the study of how people make choices to get what they want. And one of those most basic concepts is supply and demand. So supply has to do with how much there is of something. If there is a low supply, as they show you with the M&Ms, there might be only one M&M. If there's a high supply, that means there are many M&Ms. Demand has to do with how much a person or a group wants something. So demand can be low or high. If it's something that people don't want, then there's a low demand. If something that people really want, they use this woman with chocolate, then there's a high demand for that. Down here at the bottom are a couple of questions that are three questions that you need to answer. One is, how does supply and demand work in your home? So you might think about your home and think about, well, how does that work? Maybe you think about food. Maybe you'll think about food that you would like more and there's never enough of. Maybe there aren't ever enough Takis for you. Maybe there are tons of Takis. Maybe you go in the bathroom and you're out of toilet paper. Maybe it's, however you want to do, you think about how does supply and demand work in your home. And then the second question is really straightforward. What's something that you have little of? So that would be a low supply. And what is something that everyone wants? So that's high demand. And you're going to type those in those boxes. Remember, again, as always, that when you want to type, you need to be out of present mode. Okay, the next page is a map. And this map, what is listed here is areas, this is scarcity. And scarcity is when there's just not enough of something. You really can't find something because there's such a low supply of it. And if you remember, I don't know if you remember, but when coronavirus first hit, toilet paper was something that was it experienced scarcity and people couldn't get toilet paper. And there was a big worry about that. As you're looking at the map, there are a couple of things you need to look at. You've got your little, you've got the key here. So the darker or the dark purple or the black are the areas of most concern. And then the areas that are the light purple, there's not as much concern. And the question that they're asking here and talking about is that Utah is one of the states that experienced toilet paper scarcity, or in other words, there wasn't enough toilet paper for everyone. So looking at the map, you're going to name one state that experienced more scarcity than Utah. Now, you may not know the names of the states, and this is very important. If you go to the next page, there are two maps side by side. The question is listed again. And now you can look at the maps and you can see where Utah is. You can see the states that had more scarcity than Utah. And then you can type your answer into the red box. So on page 4, on the previous slide, you do not need to type your answer in because this is the page where you can type it in. So you're going to look at that. The next page talks about surplus. And so we've talked about demand and we've talked about supply, low and high supply, low and high demand, and we talked about scarcity where there's not enough. Surplus is where there is more than what you need. So, for instance, again, talk about coronavirus and restaurants. A lot of restaurants had to close down when coronavirus first hit. And so when that happened, farmers who had all these fruits and vegetables that they used to sell to restaurants suddenly had too many and they had a surplus they just had to throw away. So what you need to do is write 2 questions that you wonder about after reading this slide. And that could be questions that you find as you're reading the slide and as you're looking at the picture that is there. What are 2 questions that come to mind? And type those into the boxes there. This next one, what you're going to do, this is where we're going to see and do the assessment. So your instructions here are to connect the arrows to the correct description of the economic term. Can you go back and look at the previous slides? Of course you can to do that. Now, all of you, if you remember from your science, you have learned how to use the arrows. So you're going to use an arrow. You'll have to make your own arrows and take your whichever one of these matches low supply, which matches high demand, scarcity, low demand, and high supply. So you'll have to read the example. They don't give you a definition here, but they give you an example of something, and you are going to connect the arrows to make that work. The last slide, and this is a level 4, so a little bit more difficult, but you're going to type in the boxes, and you're going to create your own example or definition of the terms low supply, high demand, low demand, and scarcity. You can look at the previous page to see how they did it. Don't use those same examples because that was something we just used. You'll have to create your own, just as it says, your own example or definition of the economic terms using those complete sentences. All right, that's the end of this social studies for this week.